All right, welcome in to another NHL draft episode from Hockey Royalty. This time we got Sixten Funqvist talking about some Swedes. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing fine, guys. Thanks for having me again. I should say it's been a while, but I'm doing fine. How are you guys?
Very good. Yeah, I think it was right around Christmas time when we had
Yeah.
you on last. So
I
was fun.
remember being far up north in the northern part of Sweden. It was cold, and I didn't have my podcast equipment with me. That's all I remember.
Right.
No, everything's going good. Just after this, gonna go get some barbecue on
Awesome.
a nice 95-degree day here in Texas. But yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Awesome. I just came back from the beach, and I think we're touching about 90, 95 maybe. I don't even remember the Celsius to Fahrenheit degrees. I'll actually I'll Google it. But it's been hot as hell here. So and I'm sitting in my son's bedroom, and we have the evening sun blazing down on the window, and it's like I'm in a sauna right now. But other than that, I'm all good.
So how many hours of sunlight are you guys getting right now?
Right now, well,
You guys are up north.
Well, I live in the southern part of Sweden, but my in-laws are up north. So here, I guess sunrise is at around 4:30 a.m. and it sets around, I don't know, 10:30 maybe.
Wow, that's a lot.
But it turns quickly now. We've passed midsummer, so it turns pretty quickly. But up north, where I'm headed in a couple of days, we pretty much get sunlight 24/7.
Yeah, when I visited Norway for my backpacking through Europe, it was only dark for like an hour.
Yeah, I went to a wedding once with my then girlfriend, now wife, even further north than where we're headed Saturday, and we came back from the wedding at 2:30, and it was bright as day. And at 3:30, the sun, just disappeared and went straight back up. So
just pokes on down. Well, we're here to talk about some Swedes, get some experts in here. Kings love their Swedish players, Adrian Kempe, Tobias Bjornfot, Victor Arvidsson, et cetera. So chances are
Jacob
we'll take
Movari.
one. Yeah, Jacob Movari. Sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect your favorite player there. So chances are they will take one. Let's start with the later round guys, and the guys that the Kings have been doing a decent job at picking. Obviously, Matt Roy in the 7th round, Mikey Anderson in the later rounds, getting quality minutes out of some of these late round guys. And Joe, you mentioned a couple names, and we'll start with Oscar Asplund. What do you see in his game, and how does what does he bring to the table?
Oscar Asplund, or did you ask Joe? Sorry.
No, I asked.
Yep.
I asked you. Yeah, the Swedish expert. Yeah.
So Oscar Asplund is playing he's in Hockeyallsvenskan. I could see him being quote unquote promoted to the SHL because he did actually play one game in the SHL last season with Rögle, but he's been doing fairly well in Hockeyallsvenskan, I gotta say. I mean, he's a decent sized D-man, 5'11", 172 pounds he's listed at. Or for those of us using the normal standards, that's 180 centimeters, 78 kilograms. So to his, I think the downside for him now is actually his weight and his lack of muscle. But then again, he's only 18 years old and he's late. Sorry, he's late in the year. He's born November 18th, so he's pretty young. He's just 18.5 years basically, and lots of time for him to kind of build up some muscles. And that's the thing when you talk about players. I think I mentioned this before, and I know I mentioned it to Jesse over at All the Kingsmen, that when you talk about young guys, especially D-men, it's kind of unfair to give them a verdict, a final verdict at the age of 18, because there's so much that can happen at the age 22, 23, 24, even later. But Oscar Asplund is a great guy. I think he's a smart player. He can carry the puck. He's got his stick where it's supposed to be pretty much the entire time, which is something at least I would be looking for if I were a team looking for D-men for the NHL, because the skates move fast and you kind of want the D-men to know what they're doing defensively, so to speak. He did play a couple of games with the U20, but I think that was more for, I wouldn't say recreational, but getting fit back into fitness with Altoona. He played 48 games in Hockeyallsvenskan. Actually, that's also his second season in Hockeyallsvenskan, which, for those of you who don't know, is the second tier hockey league in Sweden. We have a bit of a different system, obviously. I can see him staying in Hockeyallsvenskan, maybe even getting loaned out or even signed by an SHL team to this coming season. We have a bit of a weird transfer window here, but I think he's a solid pick. I would expect him to build, like I said, build up some muscles, getting a bit tougher, because he's not the biggest of guys, so he might have to use more muscle to, how do you say?
Bulk up.
Yeah, bulk up, but to kind of defend his area, defend his spots, especially in front of the net. But other than that, I think he's a solid demon. I don't expect him to be the next Drew Doughty or someone like that, but a solid bottom 3 maybe, or even middle 2 defenseman. I think that's a solid lookout for him, honestly.
Yeah, the Kings do have a couple of picks in that 80s range, if I'm not mistaken. And another name that's kind of ranked down there, another defenseman, Ludwig Jansen. He's another one that looks like he's in that the second division there in Sweden, but somebody else that could be a potential option for the Kings as they get a little bit later into that round.
Yeah, so he plays with Södertälje, and I have a very close friend who's a huge follower of Södertälje, and he's been praising Ludwig Jansson pretty much the entire season. Södertälje, they're a bit of a roller coaster team in Hockeyallsvenskan and have been for quite some time now, but they're looking to you can call it a rebuild for them as well, even though you run the risk of getting relegated down to third-tier hockey in Sweden. But Södertälje have been able to make that flying rebuild, if you will. And I think with their maturity in terms of players on the roster and also a bit more calmness in the organization, they could turn to their younger players at greater extent throughout the season. We should mention that Jansson did play 47 games during the regular season and also another 2 games in the relegation battle. But I can see him getting a bit of a more prominent role come this season, actually. And like I said, people are praising him highly in Södertälje. That doesn't always mean he'll do very well in the next level or even a couple of levels above Hockeyallsvenskan, because there's a pretty big step going from Hockeyallsvenskan even to the SHL, not to mention Hockeyallsvenskan to the AHL, the NHL, and so on. So, but yeah, I kind of like him. I really do. He could be a dark horse. Bit of a bigger guy, not that much, 176 pounds, 6 foot, so pretty much in the same area there. But yeah, I'm finding hard to use the correct words here. But if you're looking for a bit of a project, these 2 guys could be something for the future. Don't expect them to come in maybe even 2 or 3 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, 3 years could be fair, but yeah. Yeah.
Long development path.
That's something
I would say so.
We've talked about that with the Kings having such a deep prospect pool. That one of the things we talked about on our show just last night was, being more willing to take a risk on some of these guys, particularly in the later rounds, and try to hit that home run, even if they are projects, just because of how deep the system is. So that's interesting to know. A couple of blue liners that may be projects, but could be high ceiling.
Yeah, and like you said, the Kings are pretty stacked, and I think we mentioned this before. The future is pretty bright for LA. I gotta say, I'm kind of enjoying watching it from afar. And I mean, Ludwig Jansson could be a good fit when you expect the Kings to be, maybe not in the Tampa Bay, Colorado region, competing for the President's Trophy year in and year out, but fighting for division titles at least, and maybe 2 or 3 years from now, maybe even sooner for the Kings. But then Ludwig Jansson could be someone making his way into the NHL for sure.
Yeah, another skater a defenseman that I'm looking at, and I know that a lot of Kings fans are clamoring for size on the left side, and Simon Forsmark, final ranking in the European skaters was 33rd, 6'2", 191, played for Örebro. what do you like about his game? Because it looked point per game in the junior, and then played 41 games in the SHL, which is pretty good for a draft year.
I like him a lot. I really do. He's a very smart defenseman. I keep coming back to the stick on the defensive side, and he's very smart. He interrupts play, or he breaks plays, and he doesn't he doesn't care if he's facing a superstar, or he doesn't care who he's facing. He just removes the guys that needs to be removed in front of his net. And actually, he played, like you said, quite a lot. Only 4 D-men played more games during the regular season than Simon Forsmark in Örebro. We should mention that, I think I mentioned this before, but Örebro were a bit plagued by injuries during the season, which came to benefit Forsmark, because other than that, we would have seen him further down the pecking order, and we wouldn't have seen his development the way we have actually. And he might have played more junior games than SHL games, but hey, fortune favors someone else at some point. when one guy goes down, it's the next man up, and he was the next man at some point, and he kind of went with it. And I really enjoy his season. He was actually one of the, whenever I watched Örebro play, I always kept my eye for Forsmark, because I think he's a very smart player at such a young age. He's a bit of a bigger player, like you said. He's 194 pounds, which is decent. I think he's a dark horse. He could be a gem here. I really, really like him.
You mentioned him on the show we had in December. I remember you talking about him.
I did, maybe. Oh,
you
Jesus,
did.
I don't
you
remember
did.
what I did yesterday.
So that's funny that Randall brought that up, because I remember you mentioning him on that show. So
that's cool.
Yeah. And so the Kings also have in their second round, they have the 51st overall pick, and there's a couple of players now. Again, depending on where you look, rankings are all over the place. Yeah. And actually, maybe real quick before we get into the second round Swedes, out of curiosity, would you, because there's guys that are ranked, I look at, and we'll touch on him later, but like a Marco Kasper, he's anywhere from the top 10 to in the 20s. How would you rank, say, your top 3? Really, I know this is kind of off the cuff, Swedes in this draft. Is Kasper in that, or is he a little bit lower down? Because it seems like the Swedes in general, like a lot of this draft, it's all over the place.
Yeah. For me, Marco Kasper is nowhere near. The 15 would be low for Marco Kasper, honestly. I really like his play. I like Jonathan Lekkerimäki a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking Swedish nationals? Because that would disqualify Kasper.
That would disqualify Kasper. I would say those that are playing in Sweden, because I know.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Austrian. Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a very even race between Lekkerimäki and Marco Kasper as the number 1 guy standing out in Sweden this season. But I think I might. Someone will hang me for this, but I think I would prefer Marco Kasper, because the way he kind of adapts to his new environments. We haven't seen that with Lekkerimäki, with him being promoted from the the Djurgården U20s up to the first team, stuff like that. But Marco Kasper has moved countries. When he came, like a couple of months before he came to Sweden, he started to study Swedish, so he would make himself more acclimatized early on in Sweden. And when I talked to Marco prior to the World Juniors, I think, he didn't want me to ask any questions in English. He always wanted to talk Swedish, because getting familiar with his environment, getting to know people, making a new home, for that matter. Yeah. And I think that tells a lot about his personality and his will to reach his goals. And obviously his goal would be the NHL. I think when you have a personality like that, it could kind of not beat skill on the ice, but with his skill set, it's a great compliment. And
well-rounded.
Yes, and that would make me pick Marco Kasper as the number 1 guy standing out in Sweden before Lekkerimäki.
So I took us on a little bit of a sidebar there, but I was just curious about that with the amount of there's a dozen players that are in Sweden that are projected to go in the top 100, and there's a number of them projected to go top 30. So it's in the first round. It's a deep draft for those in Sweden. So
once again, I gotta say, Sweden has become pretty decent producer of hockey talent over the past 10 years or so.
No question. So with the 51st pick, that second round that the Kings have, there's a couple of players that are right around there, depending on the ranking you look at. The one I am and Scott Wheeler's got a couple of them there. Kelly Odelius, and apologies for any name butchering that I may do.
No worries.
And Ludwig Persson. So a couple of players right around that range that could be realistic options for the Kings at 51. So I'll let you decide which one you want to touch on first, and Odelius or Persson, but I think those are a couple of interesting names as well.
Let's do Odelius first. And if you want me to do the complete Swedish pronunciation, we could be here all night. But no, Odelius is that's how he will be named in the US anyway. But it's Odelius. It's very Stockholm. You might say. He's actually born in Södertälje as well. We mentioned Södertälje before, and he's been playing with their U20. Sorry, U16, I think, a couple of years back. Odelius only played a couple of games with Djurgården in the SHL this past season, and Djurgården had a rough season. They fired their coach 6 weeks in or 5 weeks in or something like that. I can't really remember. Maybe it was 8 weeks, but they couldn't really come back from it. So they got relegated. And whenever a team is fighting to avoid relegation, they cut back on the talents and let the experienced guys kind of play. And that's why we didn't see Odelius play that much in the SHL, to be honest. And I think he'll get a prominent role in Hockeyallsvenskan, mainly because Djurgården are financially they had to make some financial cutbacks, obviously being relegated, but and that, I mean, it affects the roster as well. And Odelius could get more out of his ice time in Hockeyallsvenskan. So we shouldn't read too much into the fact that he went. Actually, I'm cheating. He only went -1 in the SHL, but he didn't have any points, nothing to kind of show for. If we talk in a year and we look at Kalle Odelius' stats from Hockeyallsvenskan, we'll get more of a know on where he is playing against men, because he only played 7 games, and that's his first 7 games against men in Sweden. So, but he's standing out in the U20s. He's actually too good to be playing in the U20s, I gotta say. I mean, as a D-man, scoring 30 points, 23 of them being helpers in the U20s. That's in 42 games, I should say. 43, sorry. That tells you something about his capacity as an offensive defenseman, I gotta say. And I'm kind of curious to see where he'll be played, and if he'll get the power play ice time, if he'll get top 4 minutes at some point, if he'll get where will he be utilized, kind of thing. And judging from his ice time, then I will look at his points and see what he can do, how he can kind of translate his game to play against men this season. But playing against his peers, he's really, really good. And he could be a gem for anyone taking a gander here, or taking a flyer, sorry.
He certainly fits, he's a left shot D, something that the Kings in their prospect pool is the one spot that they're looking at.
The Kings are loaded on the right shots.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, a little less so on the left.
Yeah, that's something to bargain with, I'd say.
Anyway. I would agree.
Yeah, they really only have Tobias Bjornfot, Kim Nusainen, and Mervari at this point on the left. That are prospects, yeah.
Huh.
So
how about that?
I mean, and you prospect's a loose term when Bjornfot's already played over 100 games, but
don't forget we got it. There's Askarov as well over in.
Kirsanov in Russia. Yeah,
I knew I was Askarov.
So Ludwig is the next one. He's out of Frölunda, 61 points in 41 games in the junior. He's a left winger, 6 foot, 178. What do you see from his game?
First of all, Frölunda are pretty known for developing talent, and a lot of players. Sorry, a lot of teams. I should say, are kind of have been modeling their youth programs after Frölunda, which is why we kind of see the development of Swedish talent on a broader scale. Before going to I'm going to get to Ludwig. I'm sorry for a detour here, but we see a lot of Swedish teams developing we have a hockey high school system in Sweden instead of hockey college. People go to high school playing hockey, or the equivalent of high school, I should say, between the age of 16 through 19. And Frölunda were one of the first one of the first organizations in Sweden to kind of set this up, and most of the other clubs now have one. And but Frölunda are, creep of the crop still. Getting to Ludwig, sorry, that was a bit of a detour, but I like to speak. He's notching up the points in the junior league, and like you said, he's had 61 points in 41 games, which is Nikita Kucherov level of hockey. And we've seen talents coming through the junior hockey leagues in Sweden doing stuff like that, and then failing miserably in the playing against men kind of thing. I don't think that's the case for Ludwig Persson. I definitely don't, because he's pretty well-rounded. He's pretty big, to be honest. Well, not big, but I mean, no, he's a decent sized, and it should be really interesting to see, because playing in the SHL, he's only had, counting it up, I think a couple of points in 30 or so, 20 or 30 games in total. And then again, being a young guy on a top tier team, you don't get the ice time you kind of want, or maybe even honestly deserves at some point. So he's being loaned out to BIK Karlskoga in Hockeyallsvenskan this coming season, where he should get a prominent role. Fingers crossed for him staying healthy. I kind of like him. I do. I don't expect him to be the next Lucas Raymond, but I think he can use, because he's a pretty fast skater, and that usually goes very well in the smaller rink if they're able to kind of keep the skills with the stick up, and that's what I think would benefit Ludwig Persson. I think he can kind of take his game to the next level for a season or two here, and then move over and do maybe the AHL, maybe even East Coast for a limited amount of time. But just getting acquainted with the smaller ice, I think he can do very well.
Would it be fair to say that he's kind of the player that you wouldn't be surprised if he ends up turning into a legitimate, NHL prospect, or he could, as he evolves, he could also kind of, for lack of a better term, almost kind of flame out and just not make it. There's a little bit of high risk.
Either way here, yeah. It's a double-edged sword. No, that's a bit unfair to kind of say, but it could go either way. But I would say he can turn out to a pretty decent NHL prospect. Yes, not superstar, but a decent NHLer if we're lucky. Yeah.
So before we get into some of the first rounders, we got a live note here from our sponsors at DraftKings. The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on your favorite sports, you can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000. And if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props. Your betting options feel endless. And if I'm looking at betting a game today, Dodgers in LA are playing Colorado. Urias looks good on the bump. I would take the W for the Dodgers and maybe a home run from Freddie Freeman or a base knock from Jake Lamb coming and getting brought up today for today's game. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN to make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. So before we get into first rounders in this draft, we've already taken a first round Swede before in Tobias Bjornfot. We mentioned him a little bit, over 100 games. kind of fizzled out towards the end of the season after the injury, didn't really get much playoff time. From your opinion, Sixten, like what have you seen from his game, and maybe why is he struggling towards the end of the season? Are you seeing something different than how they drafted him?
I think I haven't been reading up on his injuries kind of thing, but looking at him play, I wonder if he kind of was hiding something, or playing a bit injured, trying to make it through kind of thing, the way it goes during playoffs. But I'm still a firm believer in Tobias Bjornfot being a long-time NHLer, because he's got the skill set to play in the NHL. He's got the composure, if you will. He's got the calmness to his play. Maybe not always, but in terms of overall, I gotta say, I think this is a one-off, or maybe for lack of a better term, a one-off season, and we'll see progress being made in the next couple of years again, because he's still a young guy. And from time to time, I didn't watch all the Kings games, although the time difference is to my benefit here. I like him. I do. But I think he needs to raise his game and keep it on a higher level consistently to kind of keep his place, because we've been talking about prospects coming up, and the Kings are pretty stacked, obviously. And they've got another. I mean, if he doesn't keep raises his game to get it, a higher lowest level, I think he can get the competition will pass him, so to speak.
The one thing that I think we're trying to figure out over these so he's played, you could say in parts of a couple of seasons because of the way the couple other seasons were shortened.
True.
He came up really, really young, teenager when he got into the league. So, he's kind of thrown into the fire a bit. Well, what I think there's a question right now is, what exactly is Tobias Bjornfot? Is he going to be an offensive defenseman? Is he going to be kind of a steady stay at home, but capability of moving pucks? Because he does seem calm with the puck. It's just, we haven't really seen him kind of take the reins on one sort of style of play, if you will. When he was in Sweden and when he was drafted, what was the type of defenseman that maybe you would have expected him to be as an NHL player?
To be honest, to kind of start with this in another direction, maybe, but I thought he left Sweden too soon, because he had a great season with Djurgården. Sorry, I'm failing my computer here, before leaving. But I think I was talking about this the day with someone, and we were kind of because he left at 17, or maybe just turned 18, or obviously turned 18, but we both of us were like, yeah, but what if he'd stayed for another year, or what if because he excelled in the U20s, and he played only 7 games with Djurgården, and I think he wasn't lured or tricked to go, but I think he chose the adventure too soon, maybe. And if he'd stayed another year in Sweden and played those more consistent minutes with Djurgården, maybe he'd known what kind of a player he was. And but he had a decent loan stint with. I think it all comes down to, what does the coaching staff want from Tobias Bjornfot?
Sure.
Why are they? Because we can kind of go, what do we expect from him? But what do the Kings expect from him? What do they want him to play? Because obviously he's shown he can play pretty much either way. But are they putting him in situations that maybe contradict each other? If they start him, get him a lot of defensive zone starts, yeah.
And that's a good. I like that, because when the Kings lost a couple of very offensive defensemen, right?
Yeah.
Drew Doughty got hurt, Sean Walker got hurt, and they had talked about how they need other players to be a little bit more offensive, and Bjornfot was one of them. And he showed moments, right, Randy? There were spurts of Bjornfot jumping up into the play, making really nice passes in the offensive zone, deep in the offensive zone. Like he was down below the dots. Like,
and you just wanted to see him bury one of those shots to get some confidence, or
even just do that, like have that have that in his game maybe a little bit more consistently. Now, like Sixten, like you said, maybe there's a tug and pull there with how much the coaches want him to do that. But it was nice to see him when he showed those flashes. And I think we're just trying to wait and see where he's going to settle in, because right now in Los Angeles, there's a hole right now that he is sort of penciled in there as the number 2 left defenseman. Is he ready for that? It doesn't look like he's shown it so far, but could he evolve into that, second pair left defenseman?
Yeah.
I guess that remains to be seen, but he's shown flashes, right? It's just that there's that consistency, which again, he's still so young. So another year in Sweden, that's an interesting note, because another year playing in the SHL against men before he comes over may not have been the worst thing in the world for him.
I think that happens a lot with players, not only from Sweden, but they get their NHL deal. They get, not for the money, but they get the acknowledgement that the organization believes in me. They want me to come over, and if I don't go now, maybe someone else will take my spot. And I think that's both really cool. And if someone asked me to do it, I'd probably go as well. But looking at it from afar and seeing how many, maybe not top tier prospects, but prospects, or possibly each other goes too soon.
Yeah.
I think
I'm looking at it, and like the Kings have been on this, and Kings fans have been on this adventure to find a partner for Drew Doughty for forever, right? And Forbert and Muzzin, and then so who's going to be the next guy? And when they drafted Bjornfot, and then he played at camp and everything like that, and Doughty was like, "Yeah, man, he's steady. Like I like playing with him, this kid." And then so you get recognition from one of the best defensemen to ever do it, and then you play with him at camp, and I think fans automatically assumed, okay, there's our lefty one right away at 19, and that's a lot of pressure to put on any kid. You saw how many players, Oli Mata failed at it, and a lot of people have failed at it to play with Drew Doughty. It's not an easy thing, because he kind of is a wild card out there, and you have to really be the stalwart on the other end of the ice, and it could have been too much for a 19-year-old.
I wonder how much being drafted by the Kings played into that, because they were kind of coming out of, they weren't a team they were just getting ready to start this kind of rebuild process. So I wonder if it was a team that had a little bit more of established, back end in a blue line, that they would have recommended stay in Sweden, right? And maybe, so I wonder how much that plays into it. But
wasn't he the pick that we got for Muzzin?
He might have been.
No, what? No, what was it?
I think
so.
It
wasn't. What was it?
I'd have to look that up, but I think it was. And like sometimes when you have that instant draft, when you trade away a left shot and you draft a left shot, it
was for Muzzin.
Really?
Yeah. So it's such that pressure, like, because you're automatically assuming that they're going to take over that spot right away. Like that's what. Oh, we got rid of this guy and we drafted this guy for that reason. I think there's a lot of pressure with that.
You mentioned Drew Doughty, and the thing is, Drew Doughty throughout the season, or actually when Drew Doughty was injured, I remember him praising Tobias Bjornfot again in terms of play, in terms of his capability to kind of fill the void for Drew Doughty himself, which also can add pressure.
Sure.
But in terms of what the Kings want to do with Tobias Bjornfot, if the coaching staff and the management, sets up a plan for Bjornfot, hopefully they'll involve Drew Doughty, because like you said, he can do it all. And if Drew Doughty gives Tobias Bjornfot more pointers as to, let's say they want him to be the offensive defenseman. Yeah, Drew Doughty can do that. He can give the pointers that Tobias Bjornfot needs to kind of elevate his game. So if they have a plan for Tobias Bjornfot, hopefully Doughty as well is involved, because that for me that would be a no-fail situation.
Let's get into the first round picks here for 19. Some players that might be there, and we just been talking for left shot D all day, and we'll start with a huge one. Leon Bichelle, final ranking is 9 on European Skaters. Defenseman, 6'6", 225, big boy. Plays for Lexicon. What do you see in his game? I'm seeing nastiness all over the Twitter sphere. Is that the case?
Nasty sometimes. Physical always. Also a great skater. He kind of joins joins the rush when he gets the opportunity. But he's a smart guy. Actually, he's one of my favorite prospects coming out of Sweden this season. And the thing is, he can do. I'm not saying he's the next Drew Doughty or he's the next PK Subban or Victor Hedman, but he's a bit of a Victor Hedman. I mean, the guy's a giant. He can kill you. He can actually fire a slap shot. That is a howitzer. And also, he's very calm. And I really like his style of play. And the thing is, he doesn't really seem to care. He just goes out there and plays his game. And this works. I'll do this. And that's a guy. I'll annihilate him and take the puck and move on. He doesn't really, obviously he thinks, but he's in the moment. And I kind of like that. And he's, like you said, he's a big guy. He actually averaged just below 12 minutes a game this past season, which is, I mean, that's really good for someone making his first full season abroad. Obviously, he's not from Sweden, but yeah, I like him. There's something to it that makes me go, this is a standout player. And I think you need to kind of watch him play for a couple of games to because watching him, a couple of shifts, it might be nothing. You might not even see him or actually take notice. But when you watch him play through 1 game, 2 games, 5 games, you see a pattern of him, how he moves, what he does. And there's something there. There's something really interesting here.
So depending on where you look, and as an example, the 2 different writers at The Athletic that do the prospects, there's Corey Pronman and there's Scott Wheeler. There's vastly different rankings for Liam. And I'm curious to if you have any inclination as to why that may be. So I think Pronman has him at 15. Wheeler has him all the way down at 51. And there doesn't seem to be any glaring issues. Like you generally see a guy that is this big and maybe you wonder about, how well does he move around the ice? But that doesn't seem to be a big weakness of his. Like you mentioned, he's actually not a bad skater. But there seems to be a pretty big gap across the board. And as Randon mentioned, he's in the top 10 in terms of European skaters. So there's a wide
I don't know. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, obviously you didn't write the ranking, so you would, but just curious if you've heard anything as to, the talk around him, pros and or cons.
I haven't. I read that Scott Wheeler had. I'm not flaming Scott Wheeler. I like his writing. I really do. But that's a weird ranking because it's really low compared to pretty much anyone else. And I haven't heard anything that would qualify him as anything else than a first rounder. Honestly,
so what you're saying, if he does slip to 51 in Wheeler's rankings right where the LA picks, that would be a steal.
Hello, yes, it would. No, but I mean, okay, maybe early second round, but no, he's too good to be anything below that. Honestly, because he's got it all. You see big guys making the NHL nowadays as well, but you don't see those big guys being that fast of a skater, especially not on the D.
Yeah.
So there's something there, and that's weird, honestly.
Interesting. I listened to what to give a shout out to all the Kings men. I listened to you on there talk about him, and you said that the takeaways in Sweden hits that are only considered hits if you take away the puck.
Yeah.
Right. And so he averaged over a hit per game.
Pretty much. I think he
took a puck away from a player, and with only 12 minutes of ice time. That seems like he has a knack for it.
I think he had 28 in 29 games or something, so just below 1 per game maybe, but that's still really good. And though, like we said, that doesn't count for all the hits he kind of threw or all the times he threw his body around. So yeah.
So the next guy I want to talk about, 8th on the final ranking for European skaters off of NHL.com, out of Stockholm, playing for Djurgården is Liam Ogren. Left winger, you have him at 6'1", 201, so a little bit bigger body. What does he bring to the table?
Skating is really good. I think, but the thing that kind of stands out is his vision, his ability to place the puck where no one else kind of sees. Not in terms of maybe shots, but in terms of passing. I think he, like you said, he's ranked pretty high, so he's not a diamond in the rough player at all. But I think he can still surprise people. And like with all the Djurgården players, Djurgården have a great bunch of players able for this draft or eligible for this draft. We should see them excel. Yeah, I would not demand, but I would hope them excelling this coming season in Hockeyallsvenskan, because that's what I kind of expect from Djurgården, and that's what we should expect pretty much from this high level prospects coming out of the hockey factory over there. But in terms of his play, yeah, his vision, he's obviously too good to play the U20s, and so he needs to transition his play to play against men on a consistent basis to kind of get the attention he deserves, I guess. But I don't think he'll have a problem in doing so as well. So give him a season or two in Hockeyallsvenskan and or the SHL, and he'll be ready to play bottom 6 minutes in the bottom 6 minutes in the NHL, I think, because he's really interesting.
He's destroying his own age group. I mean, almost 2 points per game in the juniors, and so let me just ask you a general question about the Swedish with the being demoted. When teams get demoted like that, you said obviously there's less money. It's a lower level league. Do they often go for a younger team and a cheaper team because they have to, and they just play the prospects because that's what's better for them, or like how does that normally work for those teams?
It really it varies from team to team, because their own money comes into play quite a lot. But just as a comparison, I think the Swedish in the SHL, the teams get around, give or take, $3.8 million per team in TV revenue, and in the Hockeyallsvenskan, I think it's around $200,000. So that's a bit of a difference in terms, with most of them, the money being plowed into rosters. That kind of makes the team choose other paths. But comparing Djurgården and last year, HV71 were relegated and they're now back. They had a lot of money in the bank and stuff like that, so they could kind of put together. They kind of brought in players being, bottom tier SHL players to play in Hockeyallsvenskan, and they kind of walked through pretty much the season, and they're now back. I don't think Djurgården will go down that route kind of, thoroughly, because they don't have the money that HV71 had. And just looking at the roster early on, yeah, we'll see a lot of younger players making their way into the roster here, especially actually from the goalie on out. So we'll see a lot of local guys, and I think that's the thing you can kind of relate to, we can use as a takeaway. Maybe, you'll see younger guys, but you also see more local guys that's been playing with the team or in the city before, to kind of, with the heart in the right place, so to speak, coming back to their boyhood team and trying to bring them back to the SHL or the top tier level. But Djurgården will for sure use their younger guys more. Malmö did so a couple of years back, and it worked really well. And so I would expect Djurgården, and we'll see Liam Ergren. We probably won't see Lekkerimäki. I think he'll leave, but we'll see a lot of the younger guys, Odelius, like that, getting prominent roles in Djurgården.
A player I want to just jump to now that is probably is becoming maybe one of my favorite players in the draft, and I'm probably going to get my hopes up only for him to be selected ahead of us. But you actually turned us on to him back in December on our podcast. You were talking very highly of Marco Kasper, and this is a player that he seems just extremely well-rounded. He plays both ends of the ice. He can play the middle. He can play the wing. Smart player, patient on the puck. Like, is there any negative to this kid's game? He seems just like such a solid NHL prospect that I am really itching to. That we had a show the other day that I hope that we had selections on who we thought or who we hoped to fall, and he was the one I hoped falls out of that top 10, top 15, and slips to 19 as Marco Kasper. How was his season this year?
Awesome. I love him. I really do. I don't see anything negative in his game. Maybe when the play transitions the other way, but that's easily worked on. So no, he's a superstar in the making. He really is. I don't think I mentioned Lucas Raymond before.
Mhm.
That's the Swedish Lucas Raymond this season, or the SHL's equivalent. He's the one thing I would like to see, honestly, is him taking faceoffs more, because he hasn't been doing so in the past season. He's listed as a center, but he played a lot of wing because Rögle were kind of stacked up the middle. So that's one thing, but you rarely see young guys taking faceoffs in the SHL, actually. So that's maybe the one thing. We've seen him play a lot of minutes on the wing, and he's been doing so very well. And but I don't expect him to be failing or not being up to standards playing in the center down the line in the NHL or in the SHL or wherever he goes. He's a superstar in the making, and he's got every tool to succeed.
Fair to say you expect him
for
to go
sure
before 19.
Oh, sorry, you cut out. I didn't hear you.
Fair to say that you would expect him to go before the 19 pick.
Yeah. I don't think he'll drop lower than maybe 15th. I don't. I hope for you guys.
Yeah.
I really hope, but I don't think so.
As far as him, I mean, how you think 1 year more in Sweden and then maybe AHL? Is he that close to being ready, or?
Yeah. And it depends on the organization drafting him. The Kings could afford him to play him in the SHL for a couple of years, maybe. Let's say, I'm trying to find a good example in the NHL. So a team like maybe Nashville, a team they kind of think they're good, but they're not, sort of thing. No offense, Nashville, I really like you, but you know, they're on a bit of a downward trajectory, and they could use some young talents coming in to kind of save the day, so to speak. They could probably take Marco Kasper and put him in the NHL tomorrow.
Especially they're losing. Oh, it looks like they're going to be losing Phil Forsberg. So that's.
Hey, is he coming to the Kings as well?
Hey, fingers crossed, Sixten. Fingers crossed.
I said to Jesse, if he's coming, I'm coming. So we'll see.
We'll see.
The boys are back in town with him and Arvidsson.
Arvidsson, yeah.
Friends. We're the two best friends that anyone can have. Man, it's been a great talking to you. All these prospects. You know, I'm not going to ask you to make a pick because I know who it is. It's Marco Kasper at 19. If you could pick anybody, but
if I don't pick him, I'll say Forsmark.
So Forsmark in the third round,
second round, third round? Late. Yeah. Hey, I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
What are the chances the Kings would trade up in the first round?
Trade 19 to move up. Yeah. I don't think that's. I'd be surprised if that happened. We did talk about on our recent show just last night that will they trade the pick outright for a player, right? For immediate help. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I think I'd be surprised if they traded. I know they did that a lot last year, right?
They moved up every pick last year.
They moved up every pick. So I guess, you know, they did it a lot last year. So maybe it shouldn't be too much of a surprise if they did decide to do that. But my guess is they will either keep the pick or trade it for immediate help. I don't know that they'll move up.
Well, they sat with Brent Clark, so excuse me, but all the later round picks they moved up to consolidated all their picks into 4. Because, you know, you can only sign so many players. So
true.
I could see them doing that too, you know, moving up with a lot of their later picks to get an earlier second round guy, an earlier third round guy, and go out and nab the guys that they want.
Before we do let you go, Sixten, I definitely want to get your opinion because you left us last in December with a nugget about a potential star for next year's draft in Leo Carlson.
Yes.
How has Leo Carlson's season kind of gone so far? What have you seen from him?
He started off really, really well. I think he scored I'm sorry, I gotta cheat this, but I can tell you, I have something for you guys as well. Actually,
Okay.
while I'm actually typing, there's I mentioned it to you, Joe, but I don't think I mentioned the exact number. Among the defensemen playing at least 70 games in the NHL this past season, Tobias Bjornfot had the lowest amount of penalty minutes.
You did
Do you
mention
know
that,
how many?
and I'm trying to think. Do either of you, Sixten or do you, Randon, think that that's a good thing or a bad thing? And I know that sounds weird, but
I know what you're getting at here. Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? Like that's part of where we're at with him. Like,
could he toughen up? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he's not, at least maybe that hints that maybe he isn't as physically engaged. Maybe that's a little unfair. But also, if he's not going to take any penalties, you would hope he's that much better at getting up the ice, moving pucks up the ice, moving play. But we haven't really seen that either. So which one is he? That's an interesting. I did not know that.
He had 6 penalty minutes.
Wow.
We should mention, actually, because I'm looking at it now. Jacob Slavin had 10. Nate Schmidt had 10. Anton Strollman had 12, and then another couple of guys had 12. So I mean,
I'm glad you mentioned Slavin. Yes, because so Jacob Slavin, though, he doesn't take any penalties, which is really rare for a defenseman that plays those type of minutes. But boy, is he a fluid skater and moves the puck, right? So if Bjornfot was of that ilk, of not taking penalties, but really involved in the play, puck mover, great skater, hey, I'd then not taking penalties. You don't have to touch anybody for all I care. But we're trying to find out like where he slots, and that's an interesting statistic.
Yeah, I know Jeff Merrick of Sportsnet mentioned a couple of years back that he wanted, I think it was Sam Girard back then, because Sam Girard had very low amount of penalty minutes in the season and still, came away with a puck, played the game, stuff like that. He wanted Sam Girard to get the Lady Byng.
Yeah.
And I think it's underrated for a defenseman playing that, like Jacob Slavin, maybe Tobias Bjornfot. But I'm actually trying to look up how many hits Bjornfot had, and I can't really find it right now.
Well, while you're doing that, because Slavin also plays against other teams' top players.
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
fact that he is able to be that effective without taking penalties. I mean, again, not to say that him and Bjornfot are the same type of player, but I would like to see Bjornfot, if he's going to be that, and again, I hate to say that he's not engaged physically or anything like that, but much more in an offensive minded role if that's how it's going to play out.
Tobias Bjornfot had 61 hits in 70 games. That's not bad.
Nothing.
But it's not a lot. I mean, it's okay, but I mean, it's not like it's not throwing his body around. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there.
He's an enigma.
He sure is. Leo Carlson. We were talking about Leo Carlson. I completely forgot to look it up. What I was looking up. Sorry.
That's okay.
But I remember him. I mean,
really young, right? Like a 15-year-old.
He was 16 making his debut. But the thing is, Örebro went on a bit of a roller coaster this past season. Like I said, they were plagued by injury, and it was noticeable throughout the lineup. And you shouldn't really expect too much out of a 16-year-old heading into the SHL. But Leo Carlson has something. He has a lot of. I don't think he ended the season he expected, or anyone else expected he would, given his start. But I do not read anything into that, because he's so young, and I still expect him to be possible top 5 pick, maybe top 3 next season, maybe actually top 2, because he's so versatile. I think it's too early to go deep on his skill set, because we should evaluate that after this coming season, because I expect him to play a lot more. But it's him and Michkov next season, right?
And Connor Bedard as well.
And Connor Bedard, yeah. And those are the 3 clear-cut top 3 guys. And 2 of them have been playing and practicing in Sweden, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I would say that Leo Carlson has something that we don't see every day. And his season would be, I think he passed, if you will, not with flying colors, but I wouldn't expect him to. But there's something there, and I'm gonna keep an eye out this coming season a lot for Leo Carlsson. As a fan, actually, because I'm no longer working with the SHL, so we'll see what happens.
Nice, get to watch it for enjoyment instead of
yeah, exactly,
for notes, right?
Exactly, and actually, well, I'm still working for the NHL, so we'll see.
All right, Sixten. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Fans out there, find all of our articles at hockeyroyalty.com. You can find all the Twitter handles floating across the bottom at hockey_royalty, at Rando Commando 24, at JW Paterino, and at Funqvist. Pleasure having you on, talking some Swedes. Hopefully we add a few more so that way. And then if Forsberg comes out, we got to have a beer together when you guys.
For sure.
To the States.
I'm not going to divulge anything, but there might be a good chance I'm coming to the LA area anyway. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, again, thanks again, Sixten. Always a blast.
Thank you guys for having me. Have a great day.
Enjoy the draft. Take care.
Enjoy your barbecue now.
Thank you.